everyone. I'm going to call our County Council meeting for March to order. If you would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a small adjustment to our agenda. We are going to have our American Rescue Plan Act presentation right away, and then we'll have public comment related to that, and then we'll move into the balance of the agenda after that. So, Mr. Murtaugh.
Mr. President,
yes.
Due to conflict of interest, I will need to abstain from any vote that's taken with this project.
Okay, thank you, Jody. Tom.
Good morning, all. I want to thank you for your time this morning. Obviously, as you well know, we've had a lot of conversation right here about this pot of money that's been made available through this piece of legislation and how it's been ever-changing for since it's been passed. We think we're finally to the place, Bob, if you want to go ahead and move forward, where we're ready to submit a plan for consideration. We're very, very excited about the projects that we are talking about. But first, I want to thank our ARPA committee. You're going too fast. You're trying to push me here. I do want to thank the ARPA committee that's worked really hard on putting a plan together, and that consists of Councilman Underwood, Councilman Vernon, Councilman Murray, and myself. So thank you for your efforts on what we've come up with today. Just a little bit of background. Tippecanoe County's award was $961,016. The deadline for expenditures of these funds are 12/31 of 24. So, we have to get these plans moving in order to get those funds expended in time. There are 5 different categories that were outlined, again, like we talked about in numerous meetings right here. Those things changed, fluctuated significantly from the time the legislation was originally passed, but we'll kind of go through those categories and then the projects that were identified within those categories. The first category was responding to or mitigating the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19 emergency or its negative economic impacts. So one of the items that we've noticed within our entire emergency management system is a lack of ambulances on the road within Tippecanoe County. Obviously, the pandemic accelerated that to a point that we recognized that we needed to get a new ambulance on the road immediately. TEAS, which is the group that runs the service, funded the money up front. And so we are going to be reimbursing TEAS for that ambulance, and that is the actual ambulance in the amount of $201,677. The other expenditure in here in this category is related similarly in that West Point Fire, which is a volunteer fire department in Tippecanoe County, along with Purdue Fire, were incredibly helpful with their mutual aid agreements and very responsive. The fact is both departments, especially West Point, had to a significant number of mutual runs both in 2020 and 2021. To compensate them for that, they have asked for some initial new equipment, which includes a monitor and a lift system for their ambulance. And those items cost $116,020. So that was their request. The other cost, Bob, if you want to move forward, is obviously we can pay for any administration of these funds. We can pay for the cost of that within this category. We are estimating that to be about $60,000. We have no idea what that will be, but we're working with Baker Tilly to help with our reporting on this, and then Barnes and Thorburg is helping with our narrative in case we know we will be audited on these funds, so we need to be prepared for those. All right, our category 2 is providing government services to the extent of reduction in revenue. This is probably where things changed within ARPA most significantly. Basically, what they are saying now is regardless of whether you've actually had a loss in revenue, you can claim what they refer to as a standard deduction of up to $10 million, which you can use those funds for other purposes. As you likely know, our public safety lit went into effect the year the pandemic hit. So Tippecanoe County technically saw no revenue loss. In fact, we saw a revenue gain because of that. So they're saying that we can, though, claim up to $10,000 without documenting that, kind of as a standard deduction. If you want to go forward, Bob. $10 million. Oh, I'm sorry, $10 million, $10 million, yeah. So we dedicate about $8.5 million of that $10 million for a match for the READY grant, okay? And, I talked about the READY grant here. That's obviously still a work in progress. And if you want to move forward, but we have some really, really exciting projects within the READY grant. If you recall, the READY grant requires a local match of $1 to do that. So those projects include, but may not be limited to, and may not be these exact dollar amounts. They're kind of penciled in, and which is a very good point. This document will be a working document, meaning if there's a change in it, then we'll need to bring it back and have council review that change. But what we're penciling in is $3 million for a potential airport terminal project that would bring passenger air to this community and to this region, a housing project that would help with perhaps interest-free loans to developers for funding of infrastructure or supplies, whatever might be needed to help get housing off the ground. We have a significant issue with housing in the community. And and the Wabash River Greenway project, which you've probably heard a lot about. That's an exciting project in which there's going to be projects in virtually every county along the river, all funded through READY, but this would fund projects obviously just in Tippecanoe County. And then or would be the match for the funds just in Tippecanoe County. And I think I had a slide there and missed it, but there's also a project around workforce and talent attraction within the community as well. Then if we can move on. The last one in this category is Bob has a project to scan historical documents, and you'll see his mug up there as well. But he's estimating the cost of this to be approximately $80,000, so it would scan all those documents that he's Vanna Whiting right there. All right. The next one is infrastructure, making necessary infrastructure in water, sewer, and broadband. And that will lead us to an incredibly exciting project, if you want to flip your slide there, in which we are partnering with Tipmont and Wintech. This is a issue, broadband is an issue that we have heard a lot about from folks within the county. Obviously, folks that are already served by adequate service, such as Comcast, Metronet, we're not talking about those folks. We also are not talking about folks that are currently served by Tipmont, okay? We're talking about the areas that are currently served by Duke, so in other words, they don't have a fiber alternative that is adequate, okay? So if you want to pull up the map, we've identified areas that Tipmont does not already intend to go into on their own very aggressive initiative. You can drag it over. So the colored areas on the maps are these areas that have been identified. So again, these are outside of the existing Tipmont footprint that are not served by an adequate provider, meaning they don't have adequate speeds to do what needs to be done these days. And that includes, for remote working, definitely remote learning, Obviously, this is an important project, not only for those things, but also for quality of life, for property values. This is something that we're very proud to say that this project will be, we can boast the fact that we can have high-speed fiber broadband to every parcel within Tippecanoe County. So that's a project that we're incredibly excited about. Also, I will say Ron Holcomb is here from TIPMON. If you have any additional questions in regard to this project, the TIPMON board has voted to proceed with this partnership if you folks so agree, and this is a project that they're very, very excited to launch. They will be doing this project alongside their current project in which to provide service to everybody that's already on their footprint. So it's a very aggressive endeavor for TIPMON, but we're very, very excited to partner with them. All right. All right. We've also had a lot of discussions in regard to regional sewer district projects. There's been, again, a lot of discussion about the one in Colburn, Americus, and Buck Creek. This is one of the allowable expenses for these funds, so we've set aside $7.5 million for that project. That, combined with available grant funding, we think could potentially cover the entire capital cost of doing that project and perhaps even attempt and helping some of our other existing sewer districts within the county. And the Steele property. So this has made the news recently. This is a piece of property that's ripe for industrial development directly south from SIA along 38. This is a very unique piece of property in that it's served by rail on the northern side of it. So the challenge to the property is it needs a lot of infrastructure. So we set aside some money here to, and we'd be partnering with the city on this to help with drainage and extension of water and sewer to this area, so for economic development purposes. And we have some great leads already on this property. So this property will probably be developed very, very quickly. So we're excited about that project as well. One thing that was added to the list of allowable expenses was decommissioning of dams. So this is something that a lot of people in Tippecanoe County are not aware of, but Tippecanoe County has 2 dams. Both of those bodies of water are actually dammed by the road itself. The DNR has determined that both of these dams are in poor condition, and they need to be decommissioned. The price tag on them has been steep. We've known that price tag was steep, and when this became an allowable expense, we recognize this is probably the time to get that done. So this is the Marsh Lake Dam and the Pretty Prairie Dam. The Marsh Lake is on 900. Pretty Prairie is on, is it Tyler? Oh, it's on Pretty Prairie. Okay, yeah, it's on Pretty Prairie. So those projects have been included in there. All right. And then one other, another project that we're super excited about is a project to help food finders with their new food market that they have down on Greenbush. Katie Bunder is in the audience. We appreciate Katie joining us today. But Katie called and said one time, hey, we want to give you a tour. And so we got an opportunity to do a tour of this facility, and this is an accumulation of a fact that most of the food banks within Tippecanoe County actually were open sporadically and did not adequately provide for the needs within the community, and they were volunteer based and so on and so forth, and they were having trouble. And this actually combines those into one shop place. I mean, it's very unique. It used to be a grocery store. It's a perfect place for this. And so this is to help with this project. It's a very exciting project for the community as a whole. The city of Lafayette and West Lafayette are going to be participating in this project as well. So, and again, Katie will be here if you have any questions in regard to that. And lastly, the last project is a camera system for recycling centers. And so this would be funding to the Tippecanoe County Solid Waste Management District for $50,000 to help with a camera system at all those locations. We've had a number of different issues, just had one yesterday out at Southwestern where folks are literally dumping at these sites. And when that happens, we have to have either our maintenance staff or our highway staff run out there, take their time to load them up, and then pay to take it to the trash transfer. We have done remarkable education in regard to the issues. We have signage out there showing what can be done, but we need better cameras that are on our system so that we can actually track that and monitor that. So that is the last actual project, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have, or if you have any questions for Katie or Ron, I'm sure they'd be willing to answer as well.
Any questions from council?
Yeah, Tom, first of all, congratulations to Katie and her staff for doing such a tremendous job with Food Finders. It's very, very much needed, and I know a lot of families that we serve are benefiting from that. A question I have is that there was not a price on there what you're wanting to do with Food Finders. How much, and is that for the actual purchase of that site?
Yeah, I'll let Katie answer that.
We've asked the county for $500,000 to purchase that building. And our plan, you'll be interested in hearing this, Barry, is that eventually we might move all of our operations there. We want to see what it takes to buy the building, and there's some renovations that we'll have to do. The roof is leaking. So, but eventually, I don't think it's a good idea for a nonprofit to maintain 3 buildings. So, and the Market Square site is large enough, so we might do that. But in the interim, we've started a new career program with Ivy Tech, and that's what we're focusing. Our offices are on the Greenbush site, and then we're focusing that program there. So if that program takes off, we may maintain 3 buildings, but it's just yet to be seen.
Thank you, and again, congratulations on the great work you guys are doing. It's very much needed in our community, and I support it fully.
Thank you, and I support you too.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Tom, I know it's a little late, but we struggled for 10 years trying to build that municipal waste treatment system in Romney, Indiana. You would not believe the hours that were put in, and Sharon can attest to that when she came on board, of trying to find funding for that sewer. And now the people in Buckaree's going to kind of get it handed to them.
And the money that is being allocated is to provide potentially some equipment for the other sewer districts as well. So in other words, so that you could request any updates and equipment you might have and that type of thing.
Is it too late to submit anything, Sharon? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's just a pocket of money, so yes,
Right.
you can, yeah. And the other good thing about that, John, is, there is, this issue has not died. In fact, it's gotten worse within the state. And so there are other pockets of money, too, that will be available for funding for those needs as well.
Because we did it on our own.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the matching grant for the Ruddy? I know we got $30 million out of the ARP. We're giving 8.5. Where's the other, the rest of the money coming from? And
So as you know, that's a 6-county regional project. So obviously the projects that are funded in other counties, the match will come from them. But any match within Tippecanoe County will be done by, depending on the project, by Tippecanoe County, Lafayette, West Lafayette, and Purdue.
so the 8.5 is our share
Basically.
of the 30 million?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you also talk a little bit more? You said you didn't have a slide on the workforce and talent attraction
Yeah,
part of that? 'Cause-
Yes, so there are, so we are still working with IEDC on identifying how these projects work. It's kind of complicated, but the money that the state is using for READY is also ARPA funding, okay? So they have to make sure all of these projects fit within the guidelines that we talked about too. So they have the same parameters on how that money works. So we are having, just on Friday, we had our latest session with IEDC in which we reviewed projects that were highlighted. Some of our projects don't fit well into the 5 categories. One of them is workforce development and talent attraction to this area. So that may be a project that we have to forego, okay? Now keep in mind, we can use our money for it because we're using that money from our standard deduction, in which you can use that money for any allowable purpose.
Okay.
It does not have to fit into one of those categories.
Is this part of the Make My Move website, or is that something different?
That's something totally different.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. This is all part of the READY website, and READY has its own website.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Tom, you also mentioned about the housing development, the $2 million. Those folks or whoever they move forward with this, is that, you say you're going to loan them the money at interest-free and it's still?
So that's what's in the current READY plan. Not really sure how that works with IEDC's guidelines. That's still a work in progress. There's going to be some sort of housing component to our plan, but not sure. It may not be, it could be a situation where it can't be a loan. It could just have to be a grant to help with infrastructure.
And this money is just for Tippecanoe County and not the city of Lafayette and West Lafayette?
No. These would be projects that would be within Tippecanoe County. Obviously, Lafayette and West Lafayette are in Tippecanoe County.
Sewer, yeah. And the airport? That's our baby?
Well, that's another hurdle we have to jump through. Purdue obviously owns the airport.
Right.
You know, for locals to be a partner in that, there's going to have to be some sort of airport authority, and none of that is set up yet. So we've got some hurdles to jump through.
So I know we've got a resolution that we'll be talking about in a minute. Is some of the stuff you're going to be coming back to us on, like how exactly we're going to spend that $8.5 million?
Exactly. This is, like I said, this is
like an outline.
I would envision that some of these projects, for one reason or another, may not come to full fruition, and we may be coming back and saying, okay, let's dedicate $200,000 to this, or, these are all being based on estimates, and some of the estimates may be over, may be under, and we may need to tweak those. So it is truly a working document.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else from council? I think it would be appropriate that we'd have public comment directly related to our ARPA plan. We will be having public comment related to any other agenda items coming up here in just a little bit. So if anyone would like to speak to the plan that's been laid out, I would appreciate those now. Housekeeping, Tom. If not, we do have a resolution that we need to consider, council, Resolution 2022-08CL.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 2022-08-CL.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilman Murray, a second from Councilman Richard to approve the Resolution 2022-08-CL. It's the resolution endorsing the plan that we just heard about. Doug, is there anything in particular we need to be aware of on this one?
I don't think so. It's pretty simple. I think the ordinance and ARPA kind of leave it to the commissioners to develop the plan, but ultimately you all have to approve spending. So I think you're a checkpoint along the way.
Okay. All right. Any other comments related to the resolution? Lisa, did you have something?
I just want to say that, like, I think this is overall a great plan. I have some concerns about certain aspects of it, particularly around the workforce attraction and the housing development, but maybe as we learn more as a community and we get more community feedback, maybe those reservations will go away.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other comments by council?
Yeah, didn't want to dominate, but I had a question about this workforce attraction. What entity gets that? Is that the Visitors Bureau or what?
Workforce attraction is a program, and you may have heard that a lot of communities are looking into these kind of initiatives. You know, that workforce is the number one issue facing this community, without a doubt. I mean, we hear it from every one of our employers. You see it every time you walk into a business, you know, help wanted. There's been a number of initiatives that have been discussed. There's a pilot project that's been launched through Greater Lafayette Commerce right now. They're working with a company called TMAP, who they're the founders of Angie's List, in which they are using social media to identify folks who have a connection to this area. So that may be they went to school here, that may be they have relatives here that they communicate with, that type of thing. And they are reaching out to them in regard to potentially coming, relocating back to the Lafayette area to take jobs from certain employers. So there's current partner companies that are a part of this project, and based on, and I believe the middle skills job is paying $2,500, maybe I'm sorry, it could be $5,000. It's either $5,000 or $2,500 if that person relocates here and stays for X amount of time at that particular position. So that's the kind of workforce attraction that they're considering.
Okay, anything else from council? If not, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Resolution 2022-08-CL is approved.
I'd just like to add, thank you, Commissioner Murtaugh and your committee. You guys did a terrific job with the presentation.
Thank you, Tom. All right, we'll move on to the rest of our agenda, and next up is our auditor's financial report. If Bob can get, it's you.
Okay, sorry about that delay, but with the auditor's report, the financial statement, we began 2022 with a cash balance of $15,823,611, with projected miscellaneous revenue and property tax, net property tax, and deducting the circuit breakers, our total funds available are $68,866,830. We deduct the encumbrances, the budget, and add back in 2% of expected unspent budget. Our total funds available to the council for additional appropriations is $4,162,052. So far this year, we've granted 1,525 dollars. We have $64,467 that were in the packet request, and of that, there's one request that was a major portion of that that's now been withdrawn, and we'll probably hear that next month. With our miscellaneous expenditures of 1505, right now going into this meeting, we have $4,159,022 available in the general fund. The revenue report, there really wasn't anything that I saw of any note except for the bottom part, just to let you know what was happening. 0761, under other financial services, reimbursements, internal refunds, and this $320,000 that we put into the general fund, that is, if you remember, we had the rainy day lit money that we were going to move over. We didn't have any moved over in January, so for February, this is a 2-month total of $320,000, so we'll be moving $160,000 from lit rainy day over into the general fund to support the a little bit reduced lit funds we have for 2022. Then we get into the fund balances. The general fund, we got a balance of about $11.5 million as of the end of February. A couple other funds that I had listed was the economic development, the lit, 1112, and just want to mention that in the $2 million that was dispersed in February, a good chunk of that was we have 2 bond payments a year for the fairgrounds. This is the larger one. One includes principal and one is interest only, and so this is the one that is obviously principal and interest, and so we've made that payment, and so I think we've now paid down that bond about $3 million out of the $19 million, or over $3 million out of the $19 million. So, you know, we're making a little progress there already. 1143 is the CUME voting system fund. It's where we can accumulate some money for a larger expense for voting equipment. This came out of 1138, the fund right in front of it there, CUME cap. And so we now have done that for a few times, and now we have $300,000 in that particular fund for future use. Down 4710 is the health insurance fund. This is a little bit deceptive, that we were just really not getting some bills from Anthem, and so we're not doing quite as well as what it's showing. That we started the year with, I think, about $8 million, and we're just, but we did have, well, the last bill was like $700,000 or close to that last month, or last week. So, yeah, we're doing okay, but numbers sometimes do lie. So they're lying to us. So, and then 4718, and this is a new fund that we created this year. We now have self-insurance for workers' comp, and so we are pulling that. When we do payroll, we're taking that out of budgets and putting it into this fund, where before we were not self-insured. So we started with $1 million. We made some in January. We had a few payments, but we're now at $1,078,000, and this is a fund, at least if I could throw in what I could see maybe for the future. And if we get to budget hearings, if this fund is growing, you know, we took $1 million from the health insurance rainy day fund to get this one started. I don't know if we want to be putting some money back into the health insurance rainy day fund if it looks like we're gaining there, and probably we will be gaining cash balance there. So I don't think I had anything else on my little list of notes, but.
Any questions for Bob concerning any of the financial report? Hearing none, Jennifer, we'll do our treasurer's report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Interest for the month of February was $69,515.98. Didn't have anything particular to note this time around. You can see the fund distribution for that interest. General fund with $103,091.99 so far with the 2 months into the year, and we sit at 18.3% of that forecasted budget for the general fund. I was more optimistic in, was it February than I am now about rates possibly rising. So we'll just have to see where that goes. I would hope that they don't go any lower. And we are gearing up to print tax bills later this week, and so bills will go out timely and should be out by the end of March. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for her? Hearing none. Next item on our agenda is our public comment concerning any agenda items before us this morning. Hearing none. Next thing is our consent agenda. Any things that need to be commented on or pulled from the consent agenda from council? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilman Murray, a second from Councilman Basham to approve the consent agenda, which includes our regular meeting minutes from February. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the consent agenda is approved. Additional appropriations, prosecutor.
Motion for approval for Prosecutor Project Safe Neighborhood Fund 8273, fiscal year 23, in an amount of $60,385.
I second.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Hamilton, a second from Councilwoman Dolam to approve the Grant Appropriation Fund 8273, fiscal year 23, in the amount of $60,385 from the prosecutor's office.
I'm pleased to say we finally received the money. This grant was approved, I think, last summer, but it took about 8 months for it to go through from the federals to the state to Indiana Criminal Justice Institute to us. So we have it.
All right. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Next, we have a salary statement for the Fund 8252.
Motion for approval 2022 salary statement in the amount of $10,875.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Hamilton, a second from Councilwoman Dolam to approve the 2022 salary statement in the amount of $10,875 for the APS Fund 8252 additional bonus. Discussion.
This is the salary statement I didn't have last month when you approved the funding, and we worked with them. Thank Bob's staff and HR and Jennifer for figuring out how all the breakdowns in between workers' comp and taxes and things like that.
I just want to comment on this for a moment. I've had a lot of thought regarding pandemic bonuses collectively overall, and obviously one from last month, and I watched the meeting. I was unable to attend due to work obligations, and I respect the comments of the council as I watched those comments at the February meeting. I am incredibly concerned about opening up a can of worms of treating not only a few people differently, but collectively the county at large, by giving, in this case, 4 people a bonus. And we can get into, deserving or not. I'm not getting into that. I'm just looking at more of a policy standpoint. And, as I think about it, I go back to what are my guiding principles? What is my role on this council? And my role is fiscal responsibility, right? And that's a key one, along with fairness and equity to all extent possible. And I internally am struggling with that. Pat, I respect the work of the APS staff, along with everybody else. And internally, I cannot come to terms, me personally, agreeing to 4 people receiving, the bonuses at which they're listed, compared to the rest of the county, when there are many other eligible individuals, eligible departments, and I don't know where you draw that line. And so for me, my own personal opinion is I'm not in favor of this.
So to clarify, this is for hazard pay too. And this money came through the United States Congress, through the state, through APS. Our APS unit is fully funded by the state of Indiana. They are basically considered state workers. All other 17 hubs, APS workers, receive this hazard pay. So I appreciate your view on and policy on bonuses for county, different departments, but this money was not requested by me. It is part of the grant funding, and they call it a grant funding, but it's technically a contract. We are contracted with APS state to follow their rules, their guidelines, their policy, their reporting. They do all the training, but through the Indiana state legislators, they divide that up to prosecutors' hubs. So it's really not, to me, a county policy issue as far as county employees being treated differently. It's funding that comes through the state and to this unit. So if they don't receive it, then they will be treated differently than all other their peers in the state that have already received their funding. So that, and I appreciate your view, and I was concerned when this came up that this would be drawn into the category of bonuses for county employees or non-bonuses. It's hazard pay. And I don't know if we have a policy in county on hazard pay, but that's what this grant contract says.
And I would agree with your comments regarding, you did not personally apply for the grant. It was just given to you from, the state APS on down. I would concur with that. And it is different than others. I would agree with your comments as well. I go back to my own personal opinion, and it's treating everyone in the county that we have control over from a fiscal sense equally.
Thank you, Ben. Other comments?
And I agree with Ben. I mean, I struggle with this as well. But when I read further from the documentation that we were given before our January meeting, it does talk about, a county policy. And you brought up a good point. There is not a policy within the county that talks about bonuses. And I know that this is an unusual situation that we are in because of COVID, but in the grant itself, it says if an APS unit, due to county policy or procedure, is unable to use the money allocated for one-time pay increases, then the unit must obtain Division of Aging approval to spend the funding in a way that is consistent with the federal grant. And this money needs to be expended by the 30th of this year. Mm-hmm. So maybe what we really need to do is, establish a policy regarding acceptance of this type of a grant. Because I feel real uncomfortable for 4 people to be getting a grant, and there's other areas out here that, they need hazard pay as well, but they aren't going to be able to get it.
The way I interpret that line is, if the money gets returned to the state APS will redirect it and get it to those employees. That's how I read that language. Because some counties where these hubs are, they may not have any policy, or they may not accept it. My understanding is every county has accepted this and distributed it. The only 3 categories you can pay this grant for are bonus, hazard, overtime. We can't go back and pay overtime because overtime that year is closed out. It's not a bonus. It fits hazard pay for all the number of cases they did. And I understand other people, everyone went through pandemic and did exceptional work. But again, this came to the United States Congress specifically for how adult protective service units across the United States handled the pandemic and their client base. So I don't really want to get in the category of bonus. It's hazard. I've always called it hazard. I did not document this calendar today as bonus. That was not the salary statement submitted to the county said just a salary statement. So I feel like we've been kind of brought into that arena of bonus or no bonus. And this is a straightforward hazard paid from the United States Congress through the state.
Barry, do you have a comment?
Yes, I would like to, as I stated last month with the health department, we're very appreciative of all of our county departments and what they're doing for our citizens and our community. However, we got to be able to look at each county department individually, and as each department county department, they have opportunities, whether you call it hazard, whether you call it bonus, whether you call it raises, whatever it is. We've got to be able, as a council, to look at it and say, well, that department qualifies for X, and we should not hold them back or actually, be a consequence for not approving what that particular department has available to them. So I feel very strongly in approving this as any other department that has opportunities to better keep their employees and their service and to reward them. So I'm very much in favor of this, and I continue to urge all the departments in our county to seek benefits that will improve the personnel.
Pat, your employees, they didn't get any overtime in 20 or 21, did they?
No.
Okay,
We didn't have the funding.
right.
See, and that funding comes from the state, so they didn't give us money, because the state budget's on a 2-year cycle. They didn't know the pandemic was coming. They couldn't fund overtime. So, like I say, it's a state, I run the program through the state guidelines, so they don't authorize overtime, I can't pay it. If not, I'd have to come to you and you have to give general fund money to pay basically a state agency run through our office. So they don't have overtime, like zero. They did, so that's how this, I believe that's probably the reason the grant came forward of the contract through the federal government, was to make up for the fact that across the country, APS units had no authorization or no funding from the feds to the states to do it during the middle of the pandemic. So I think this is looking backwards, this is a manner, basically, it could have been overtime. Thank you for that question.
And your cases, to my understanding from last meeting, doubled.
They almost doubled. They went from 500 and some to over almost 800. And we cover not just Tippecanoe County, we cover all adjacent counties. We cover 8 counties. So even though they come through, the money comes through the county agencies and pays APS, this staff is going out through all the other 7 counties. They're technically working for 8 counties, but the pay comes through our hub. So you're basically, if you rule against us, you're ruling 7 other counties have, they're appreciative, and this grant covers it. So, but yeah, it's a 2-year budget, so we had no ability to go back and ask for overtime.
I'd like to add, too, to approve this is very consistent with what the county does already, particularly like with the Sheriff's Department. They get grants to do extra patrols, and they pay overtime to their officers who participate in that grant. Not one time I've ever heard any council member or any commissioner ever say that that's not fair to the rest of the county employees. So to approve this would just be consistent with what we do with the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you again for clarifying the overtime, because I think that if you think of this as overtime versus calling it a bonus.
Okay, any other comments?
Just make sure I understand it. If we don't approve it, the money will most likely come back to them in another way?
If the state can work that quick, it's already
Okay.
March, and the money has to be spent by June.
June.
It probably
Okay.
will not.
And
because
it's not
state
money
level.
that the county can spend in another way, right? It's
No,
very,
it's those 3 categories.
yep.
Right, it stated that you have to have special approval, so we don't know what they would say.
Correct.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, we're going to proceed to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
I'm going to declare that it is approved. Thank you all for good discussion.
6 to 1.
Yes. Yep. All right, next we have Sheriff Lit Public Safety Fund 1170 appropriation.
I'll make a motion for the Lit Public Safety Fund 1170 additional appropriation as presented.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Richard to approve the Lit Public Safety Fund 1170 appropriation for $31,225. Discussion.
Yeah, this is so we can get a Jeep Compass that we ordered last year that didn't come in, but I'm told it'll be here at the end of the month. Just let us get what we planned on getting last year.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Next, we have Misdemeanor Fund 1175.
I'll make a motion that we approve Misdemeanor Fund 1175 appropriation as presented.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Basham, to approve the Misdemeanor Fund 1175 appropriation for $66,835.
That's the
Discussion.
one we get every year, and we split with community corrections.
Okay.
And we do have an additional from community corrections, and if you add the two together, it does come to the cash balance of the fund, so we got everything covered there.
Okay, so that's all covered. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Next, we have the Sheriff Donation Fund 4127.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Sheriff Donation Fund 4127 appropriation as presented.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Basham, to approve the Sheriff Donation Fund 4127 appropriation for $10,000. Discussion.
This, I tell you, the citizens of Tippecanoe County donate to our canines quite a bit, and this will give us the opportunity to purchase a dual-purpose canine that'll be assigned strictly to the Tippecanoe County Drug Task Force, so everybody in Tippecanoe County will benefit from it. Lafayette, West Lafayette, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have coroner appropriation.
I'll make a motion that we approve the general fund appropriation for the coroner in the amount presented.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Murray, to approve the general fund appropriation for the coroner for $2,267. Discussion.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Sorry,
Carrie.
It seems like a long meeting. This is to help us with our part-time staff, and our workload continues to increase. I think this is going to be our new normal, unfortunately. We've seen this over the last couple of years, as I've documented in the statistic report that you all receive. But we're averaging about 50 cases a month, and we're turning down almost 75 cases a month. So it seems to be pretty steady, and this is to help us with the office work inside, getting documentation, medical records, subpoenas, data entry, things like that. So that's what this is.
And this amount is, I believe, I don't want to answer for you, but this is the amount of payroll that was the last pay period, well, it was the first pay period paid in '22, but that pay period went for a time, it was almost all in '21, so we're getting that back. And now, we didn't get a Social Security request there, but there should be enough, since we do have some pre-tax things, insurance, that sort of thing, that there should be enough to cover the 2267 without having any Social Security.
And Ben and I met with Carrie a couple weeks ago and discussed function of her department, and we both agreed that this is appropriate at this time.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved.
Thank you.
Next, we have a salary statement for probation.
Motion for approval of 2022 salary statement of up to $18 per hour for part-time salaries, specifically administrative assistant.
Second.
Good morning.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Hamilton, a second from Councilwoman Dolam, to approve the probation salary statement up to $18 an hour for part-time salaries. Discussion. Dave.
Sorry. Good morning. Dave Hollinger from your probation department. So we have probation officers and we have administrative assistants or part-time employees also. Our dilemma right now is that of the 5 part-time employees that we have, 3 are paid through the general fund and 2 are paid out of the probation user fee fund. Of those 5, I've pushed 4 positions down to juvenile intake to assist with the work that continues to come down at juvenile intake down to jail. I'm having a desperate time trying to fill those part-time positions. The current salary rate is $13.50 an hour. The shifts vary from days, evenings, weekends. I have one part-time employee that's also doing an internship in my office right now. She's a Purdue senior. She makes $13.50 an hour and works Friday, 4:30 to 11 p.m. It's just the ugliest of shifts. So it's Friday, Saturday, and then she works again on Sunday. Just an example of some of the shifts we're asking our part-timers to help with. Of the 4 positions that are currently assigned down at intake, we just filled the second of the 4 yesterday. We've had 1 position posted, actually 3 positions that are currently, or 2 positions that are currently vacant. We've had a posting up since sometime in September. And we'll get some applicants that clearly are not qualified, others that are. Mariah, who's my supervisor down in intake, reported they had 1 that they thought they had on, and her first day of, or their first day of employment, they just didn't show up. So I'm asking for the council to consider my request that we move the salary up to a range between 16 and 18, 18 being the top, 18 an hour. I know that's a big jump from $13.50, but if you compare, I asked Mariah to make some calls and see if she could find some similar salaried positions. Howard County Administrative Assistant, part-time through Community Corrections, currently has a position posted for $16.25 an hour. Monroe County has an administrative assistant, part-time probation officer, similar in roles to what I have down juvenile intake, currently starting at $18.07 an hour, going to $20.08 an hour. And then finally, out at Cary Home, they have a part-time admin assistant, juvenile assistant, that's currently at up to $18 an hour. So I'm asking for consideration on my request to move. I anticipate that I can obtain more applicants and get some qualified participants, or applicants, I'm sorry, for the position, or positions at part-time down in juvenile. Of the 4 positions that I have that I need filled part-time, they support the full-time probation officers. They effectively do everything but sign off on reports that go to the juvenile court. I've run my request by Judge Graham and the other 2 judges on the Probation Oversight Committee, and they support my request. In fact, Judge Graham just texted me and said she's in a hearing, otherwise she'd be over here helping out or asking or supporting my request. I'd be happy to answer any questions about what the role of part-timer down at juvenile intake is or what they do. It's worth noting I've moved one of my full-time juvenile officers that was assigned in the courthouse. I've moved her down to juvenile intake to assist on basically 11P to 7A shift right now. That's how, for lack of a better term, desperate I am. I did some math. I sent an email with some erroneous numbers to Jody, but the summary is that to move to $16 an hour would would increase the liability against the general fund by about $11,000. 17 an hour would be $15,000, and 18 an hour would be almost $20,000 if you figure for 3 part-time employees. I can also tell you that right now, the way it currently stands in the 2022 budget, under the 3 part-time employees that are currently paid out of the, or should be paid out of the general fund, we should be averaging almost $5,100 a month in part-time. We've spent only $2260 for the entire year, so I'm in the black. If there's any positive, I'm in the black $7,900 against the general fund for the first 2 months of the year. Also, my probation user fee fund, where I pay 2 of my part-time employees, or we should be averaging $33 per month, and I've only spent $2,800, so I'm $38.50 in the black. That just reflects that I'm not paying out of those funds because I don't have any employees to pay. So I'm asking for consideration of effectively a cap of 18. I would like to range it from 16 to 18, and based on experience and other qualifiers, that we could move all the way to 18.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any comments, questions from the council?
Yeah, Dave, I know that, this would help, and you're going to get some help from them, but would you say your biggest problem is actually getting the applicants to apply for the position rather than the pay per hour?
I asked Mariah that yesterday because I was wondering if that would be the hours or the pay rate versus the hourly. She tended to believe at first was pay and then it was the shift. Whether or not that's, I haven't polled any of the applicants that weren't applied to find out.
See how
Sorry.
many. And have you ever worked maybe with the sheriff's department to see maybe applicants for deputies that do not quite meet the standards, that maybe you can recruit some of those to get their foot in the door and kind of go down that path?
I'd be happy to. I know that an average applicant or current employee part-time is typically is a part-time, is a student at Purdue or as a student at Ivy Tech that's ultimately hoping to get some exposure as a part-timer and eventually roll into a full-time position. Obviously, there's some educational requirement, or there are some educational requirements. It's a bachelor minimum as far as full-time probation officer employment.
That just may be something you look at to recruit maybe more applicants.
Thank you.
Other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Community Corrections Misdemeanor Fund 1175 appropriation.
Make a motion, we approve Misdemeanor Fund 1175 and the appropriation in the amount of $33,267.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilman Murray, a second from Councilwoman Hamilton to approve the Community Correction Misdemeanor Fund appropriation for $33,267. Discussion.
Good morning. As
morning,
mentioned
Jason.
earlier, this is our portion of the misdemeanor fund. We use this to lease some of our vehicles.
Any questions, discussion? Turn on your mic.
From the 60s. Help me understand, on the community corrections, when we lease these vehicles, what are we using these vehicles for? I thought people came to community corrections and did their time, and then they left and went out in the workforce and came back. Why are we leasing vehicles for community correction? I don't, and how many?
We've historically, ever since before I got there, we've leased vehicles. We lease them for some administrative staff. We lease them for our surveillance officers. We have a couple training vehicles to get our staff to and from trainings. We have a maintenance truck that we lease. I think in all, we lease about 17 vehicles.
What's the total aggregate per year? What's the aggregate total revenue?
That we bring in?
No, the cost of this lease agreement.
That's that cost.
That's the total cost for the whole year?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved.
Thank you.
Next, we have TEMA Lit Public Safety Appropriation for Fund 1170.
I'll make a motion that we approve Lit Public Safety Fund 1170 appropriation for TEMA.
A second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Murray, to approve the Lit Public Safety Fund 1170 appropriation for the amount of $44,353. Discussion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This was money you approved last, maybe August or September for radios. We ordered them then. They still haven't come in. We're anticipating that they'll come in later this year. And this would be for the Mobile Operations Center, mobile radios.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Next, we have Hazmat Fund 2546.
I'll make a motion that we approve Hazmat Fund 2546 appropriation for TEMA as presented.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Murray, to approve the Hazmat Fund 2546 appropriation in the amount of $99,040. Discussion.
These are funds where we've responded, and it's basically a reimbursement from the spillers for hazardous materials.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next two items, I believe, are withdrawn for the assessor's office, so we're going on to soil and water general appropriation.
When did he withdraw those? I spoke with him just a couple days ago.
There was some question, he had a different position than what was
Oh, okay.
brought to the Personnel Committee, and then yesterday he went to the Commissioners, and the Commissioners tabled it. They didn't take any action on that.
Okay, all right.
So without the Commissioners creating the position, it kind of puts this into a status.
Okay. I talked to him, and he's, okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Do we have a motion for the soil and water?
Soil and water, I will make a motion that we accept the soil and water general fund appropriation as presented.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Basham, to approve the general fund appropriation for soil and water in the amount of $15,000. Discussion.
So, my predecessor, I've been here since January, my predecessor, due lack of knowledge or understanding, did not ask for last year's $15,000. So it was erroneously put back into the general fund because he didn't ask for it. So we had a loss of net income last year of $13,165.01 due to that. So we are asking that the money be reallocated to us, brought back from the general fund and given to us this year. Please.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion from council? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Next, we have our item that was, I think this is the tabled one, isn't it? Yes. So first, we need to have a motion to bring it off of the table.
I'll make a motion to bring it off the table.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor to bring this item off the table from Councilman Murray, a second from Councilman Richard. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Oh, Mr. President,
Yes.
discussion regarding taking it off the table?
Yes, this
Okay.
is just strictly to take it
Gotcha,
off the
thank
table.
you.
We have to do that first for housekeeping purposes. So
I'm good.
that we're all clear, we're going to remove it from the table. So all those in favor of doing that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, so we are off the table. I will take a motion for how we want to handle the Reimbursement Fund appropriation.
I'll make a motion to deny the vaccine reimbursement fund.
Well,
Go ahead, Doug, sorry.
My Roberts rules is a little rusty, but I think you had a motion at the last meeting that is pending. It's tabled, you brought it off the table, so I think it's currently on the motion to approve from February.
Yes.
So I don't think you need a new motion.
So we don't need a new motion. By bringing it off the table, now that motion is now active.
That's my understanding.
Okay. All right, so now we're discussing the approval of the motion from February to approve. So we're either saying yes to that previous motion or denial of that motion.
Okay.
So now we're all clear, I hope. Okay.
Thank you.
Comments?
Dr. Adler would like to talk.
Sure.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you so
Good
much
morning.
for allowing me to speak today. To refresh everyone's memory, this is a request for a hazard pay bonus for our health department staff for their tireless efforts over the last 2 years. This covers 2 years of additional work that the staff has put in to help the county through the COVID-19 pandemic. The Vaccine Reimbursement Fund 9170 is actually a grant given by the State Department of Health to local health departments. It is actually health insurance dollars that have been reimbursed to the state for the administration of the COVID vaccine, and these dollars have been distributed to local health departments. So this is not utilizing tax dollars, it's not utilizing state, federal, or county funds. These are health insurance dollars that have been given back to the State Department of Health. The State Department of Health has informed local health departments that their intention for this reimbursement is that it go directly to the entity that administered the vaccine to assist with expenses related to operating a public-facing site. The State Department of Health also stated that it is not stipulating how and by when local health departments must spend the funds. We are able to allocate and spend however the health department deems necessary. This funding is not just an issue of overtime, it's also an issue of providing hazard pay to the staff who also carried out numerous duties that were not part of their typical job description. I can provide examples of some of those. For example, we staffed the county EOC for 11 months. We provided 24-hour guidance to various county departments. We assisted and operated numerous off-site testing sites from May 2020 to the present. We established off-site drive-through vaccine sites. We established vaccine clinics for local businesses and manufacturing sites. We established safe zone shelters. We operated 2 different county vaccine sites from January 2021 to the present. We coordinated and managed over 600 volunteers from the community to help those sites run. We operated a COVID call center from April 2020 to the present. We operated public safety, personal protective equipment points of distribution sites from April 2020 to the present. We operated an ESF-8 PPE point of distribution site from April 2020 to the present. We've also operated 2 United Way PPE points of distribution. We've held numerous press conferences with elected officials, numerous meetings with local school corporations and schools. We reviewed 167 individual COVID-19 event plans for the community, provided grocery deliveries to individuals and families that had to isolate and quarantine. We picked up and drove positive individuals who were homeless to various shelters or hotels at various hours of the day and night. We reviewed numerous plans for restaurants to operate under COVID precautions and provided vaccine for homebound individuals, just to name a few of the additional duties that our staff has carried out over this 2-year period of time, which has been, of course, a very challenging time for our community. Much as our county prosecutor has described, these funds also are funds that the health department did not seek out. We were given these funds as part of a vaccine reimbursement, again using health insurance dollars, with the guidance that we could use these funds in ways that we deem necessary. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the council.
Questions or comments from council?
I've got a few. Again, I've wrestled with this for a couple months, immensely. My emotional reaction is absolutely. But then I stop and think, and I try to pull my emotions out of it. I don't disagree. The health department has gone over and above and worked tireless hours and done things well beyond their job descriptions on which that they were originally hired for. Starting up a health clinic, a vaccine clinic, during the pandemic is something that you probably can't be trained for, along with the countless number of close contacts and all the other guidance that you have described. Taking my heart out of it and focusing on the policy behind it and the logic behind it and the fairness behind it. Looking over the last 2 years, roughly $80,000 was paid in overtime expenses for those who are eligible for overtime. I know it was discussed at the last meeting. There are 2 exempt employees who unfortunately do not fall into the overtime category. And so those who work the extra hours did in fact get compensated for their overtime. I think Councilman Basham, you spoke to this at the February meeting. Regarding the exempt positions, unfortunately that's the nature of the job. Does that make me heartless? Quite possibly. I work in an exempt type job and I have for several years. I'd have no intentions of receiving additional funding or compensation, whether I work weekends, holidays, nights, 60, 70-hour weeks, whatever it may be. And so as I look through all this, I'm struggling right now because I am incredibly thankful and incredibly appreciative of the work that our health department and many others have done. we have employees such as at the Villa, the Sheriff's Department, TEMA, and many others, IT. You can go on and on. IT had to make the shift to almost complete virtual environment. And while that's not direct contact with the public during a pandemic, it's still additional workload and work hours and changing mindsets. And you have all different levels of capacity with IT. That's just one area. The Villa's another area that has probably struggled as well. And as I sit here and as I listen, again, like I said, my heart wants to say yes. But as I jotted everything down and look at everything from a logic standpoint, I cannot agree to the vaccine reimbursement money being allocated for bonuses, for hazard pay, however you want to term it. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ben. Other comments?
I would like to thank the Health Department. Again, you guys have went above and beyond, and it's a tremendous service to our community. We're very fortunate to have such a high quality of department. Same discussion as a few minutes ago. We cannot restrict our departments from getting benefits and funding, available funding, to compensate, to reward, to show the employees what a great job they've done, from funding outside of our taxpayers' bottom line. This is money that's come in from grant opportunities that is there and meant for that purpose. So for us as a council to deny or to restrict those type of funds is a disservice to our departments. I encourage our departments, all the department heads, to continue to do the great job, and when funding opportunities for that particular department comes up, then we need to support it and get it to them. So I'm all totally 100% in favor to get those funds to your employees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wouldn't you say that, where do grants come from? The people who did not receive these benefits have helped pay into those grants through their taxes. So a grant is not free. It's got to come from somewhere.
Right, but those grants have been directed to the specific departments for reasons.
They're taking money out of your paycheck and everybody else to put into these different grants, and one entity is going to, and I know they worked hard. I mean,
And again,
I know so is the Tippecanoe Villa.
Sure. And again, in this case, this grant is actually health insurance reimbursement money, not tax dollars.
Dr. Adler?
Yes.
So you indicated that, that it said that you could use the funds that you see fit. How did your team come to the conclusion that all the funds should go to hazard pay, bonus pay, whatever you call it? And is there other things within the health department that some of those funds maybe should be looked at going to?
Yes, actually, the amount that we're requesting for the hazard pay is less than half of the fund. The total amount of the fund is $289,000, $287,981. And so additional considerations for the funding have been to purchase 2 vehicles for the health department, and I believe that item has been discussed with the county council in previous meetings. And then in addition, we recognize, as several people have pointed out, that other county departments have assisted the health department in our efforts, including TEMA, IT, maintenance and housekeeping, the sheriff's office, the coroner's office. And we are certainly willing to utilize some of the remaining funds to provide hazard pay stipends to those departments also. So if that is something that would assist the council in making this decision, we would be willing to consider that.
I respect that. I truly do, because it's sharing what all they put in. I just don't know where you draw the line. Who who does and who doesn't, and who makes that decision. And I guess ultimately it would fall back on us as a fiscal entity here, but policy-wise, who would be deemed essential potentially for the reimbursement funds and who wouldn't? You know, Councilman Richard, I respect your comments. Each department can go after the funds individually, and we need to do what's best to keep them, and I would concur with that. However, I just don't know where you draw that line, to be honest with you, sir. And I've wrapped my head around this because this was brought up at the last meeting as well, and in our discussion previous to this in some meetings. I don't know. Again, I go back to who's deserving and who's not, and who makes that decision.
Yeah, and I think in this case, I would go back to the letter we received from the State Department of Health. That says that the intention of this reimbursement is that it goes directly to the entity that administered the vaccine to assist with expenses related to operating a public-facing site. So I would interpret that to mean that any county departments that directly assisted the health department in setting up, maintaining, operating the COVID-19 vaccination site would be on that list, and that would include the individual departments that I mentioned.
Other comments?
In previous meeting last month, we had talked about even getting a group together to discuss with the auditor what other funds we may have that we can pull to see what we can do with. I would still like to see that happen because I think, we're going to continue to get this in front of us. And I think we need to kind of figure out if there is something we can do overall. And Ben, I agree. I think it's going to be hard to figure out how to draw that line. But I think I think we owe it to the departments to at least explore it and look at what we can do.
Other comments?
A question. If we deny this request with this money, what else can we can use this money to buy? Talk a little bit more what else we would use this money for.
Sure. Well, the information we've received from the State Department of Health really doesn't put very many restrictions on the money. One of the other items that I mentioned was purchasing 2 vehicles for the health department, which I believe has been discussed with the county council previously. As it stands right now, many of our staff who do a lot of work out in the field use their personal vehicles for that work. So having 2 economic vehicles for the department would be very much worthwhile.
So it is different than the one we just approved with the prosecutor's office. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. And then the other question is, except for 2 people, or 2 people on this list are exempt, the rest are already been paid overtime. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll speak to the vehicles a little bit. We have had discussions about that as well, since it was brought up. In 2021, there's roughly $3,500 in mileage, claims from people using personal vehicles. I'm talking to Amanda, that was roughly, in her opinion, about 25% of a realistic total of what it should have been. People just didn't submit their mileage claims. So what I asked is kind of some more data and some more information to get a realistic number so we know, is it worthwhile to buy vehicles or is it not? So we're kind of waiting on, about 6 months or so to get some realistic data to make a data-informed decision on that.
Okay, other comments?
Lisa, you asked for, what is the purpose? What else can this be used for? And in attachment A, under background, the purpose of this agreement is to provide financial compensation for the administrative costs borne by the grantee during their participation in the program. So could this money feasibly could be used to pay for the salaries of the employees that participated in the COVID situation. And, and obviously the last 2 years, who could have ever thought where we would be? No one. Absolutely no one could have thought. But when we look at the health department and we look at in 2020, overtime pay $31,000. In 2021, overtime pay $46,000. So have our employees, let's set aside the 2 exempt employees. The other employees of the health department, have they been compensated for their time? Yes. I mean, look at the overtime numbers that we see. We all have in our job description, performs related duties as assigned. We all take on extra things when we take a job. And in one job description, it says serves on 24-hour call for emergencies and response to emergencies in an off-duty status. So when you think about it, I mean, part of our jobs, part of a job when you take a job is we realize that there are going to be things outside of the scope that we thought that we were going to do, we have to do. There were things outside of the scope at the villa, the sheriff's department, the coroner's office, TEMA, all of the other departments. So, I can't support just doing bonuses for one segment of our population here in the county, respectfully.
Any other comments?
The only other thing that I will mention is, if this helps the council to make the decision, the amounts that we have proposed, we are willing to reconsider those amounts and decrease those amounts if necessary.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote to approve the appropriation as it's a transfer, excuse me. Transfer, yes, sorry, Bob. You're right, transfer for the amounts that are stated here on the screen for the $128,870 total. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I'm going to declare that that has failed. Okay, we have then salary statement, which obviously is directly correlated to that. So with the lack of transfer, we would have to say that's out of the question as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember, that never got, did that ever get moved up? Okay, so you skipped that last time.
So we skipped
too.
that last
So
time as well.
So you can decide whether to move to a...
Well, yeah, since we don't have the funding moved, I would say unless I have a motion on the floor, we'll move on to the next one. Yeah. All right, so next we have the salary statement for the $122,751.
Make a motion, we approve the 2022 salary statement for the amount presented.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilman Murray, a second from Councilman Richard, to approve the salary 2022 salary statement for the Health Department in the amount of $122,761 total. Discussion.
This is a request to temporarily increase the salaries of two of our health department employees who are currently serving as interim co-administrators for the department due to the departure of our previous administrator. The department is in the process of searching for and interviewing applicants currently for that position. So, of course, we hope to fill that position as soon as possible. So this is a request for a temporary increase in those salaries to cover that period of time that they'll be serving as interim co-administrators. And in addition, they will be also carrying out the duties of their current job. So they are, in essence, each working a job and a half currently.
Okay, discussion, comments?
So I have an opinion. I'm sure you guys could allude to that. And again, continuing to work on this and going back to my guiding principles, and that's policies, where we go as a countywide policy. And as I sit there and I think about, and I've thought about, and I've had many conversations with many different people regarding interim department heads or department head, depending on how it works, and any increase in wages or salary or compensation associated with that. I've wrestled internally with that over my experiences over several years, and other boards I sit on. We have not done this. We have not provided someone additional compensation for picking up the pieces and just kind of maintaining status quo. However, continued conversations and looking at past practices, potentially within county government and specifically within the health department, a couple administrators ago. My understanding is this was done. The only difference is that went through the process of, I believe, Wagner, Irwin, Shealy, and they were okay with the interim component of that job of being that interim when the name behooves me for a minute, but he got ill and was unable to continue to carry out the duties. And so looking at past practices as kind of where I'm at, and knowing that they are doing 1.5 jobs, probably one could argue 1.75 or more, I am in support of this temporarily.
Other discussion?
Well, again, as I have an opinion as well as Ben, I totally agree that compensating for additional work is totally appropriate. But I feel like, has this gone before the commissioners? Have they approved this?
It has been discussed with the commissioners, and it also has been vetted through the consulting firm for HR. Nope, I thought we had. Okay, I apologize. My misunderstanding on my part.
Okay, so if there's not an interim job description, then the commissioners have not approved this at one of their meetings, correct? Okay, so again, I feel like, we're circumventing the system, because now what happens, and we could be setting a precedent, because what happens if someone, another department head, they're gone for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and they say, well, someone else is going to have to take my duties, so I want their pay to be increased. And so then are we going to be getting this to come back to the council? And the other question I have, I guess that's on our next one, about until the position is filled. But when you state until the position is filled, what does that mean? I mean, a position being filled could be, if I make an offer to somebody and they accept that offer, then that position is filled, so then this would immediately stop. Is that correct?
I would interpret that to mean until the new administrator starts their job.
So until the administrator walks in the door. So on their very first day of employment, this stops.
Correct, because the interim administrators would still be carrying out the duties of the administrator until that time of that transfer, yes.
Well, I still can't approve this without it having gone through the proper channels, because I really feel like we're setting a precedent for other departments to come back up here and ask for the same thing.
Just to comment on one of the items that Councilman Murray brought up, there actually is a precedent for this. In 2013, during my first year as health officer, our administrator at that time went on an extended medical leave, and so we did appoint an interim administrator for, I believe, about 3 months, and that appointment was indeed approved by the county council, and that individual received the administrator's salary for that time that he served as interim administrator until the administrator returned from his leave.
Had that gone before the commissioners? Did they approve that before it went to the council?
I do know that it was discussed and supported by the commissioners. I do not recall if it was an item at an official commissioners meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to add, with us having the ability and capability to fund, as the department head has asked us to do, and it's not becoming a hardship, and it's to make their department better equipped personnel-wise, that we support this. That way they can continue the great work that they do.
Thank you.
I think the other thing to make note of, too, is budget-wise, I believe we're still in line with that line item being whole. I believe the vacation was paid out of the previous employee, and so I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but this wouldn't increase our costs from the administrative salaries. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's why we don't have, for this one, we don't have an additional appropriation request. There is sufficient funds.
And the way that the increase in the salary for both of these employees added together totals $1,833.33 per month. That's for both of them, which when you look at the amount that was being appropriated for the administrator's salary, that still leaves a balance or a savings of $4,670 per month that would have been spent on the administrator's salary. And also, those two individuals already received their benefits through the county, so we're not paying for additional benefits, so there's additional savings there. So it does save the county money during this temporary period of time.
Shirley?
For clarification, and I think part of the confusion with Dr. Adler is that we did update the actual job description for the posting, but we did not create an interim director posting. When that was done before, in 2013, what happened with that was that the interim stepped into the actual job description and was paid at that level directly. So, excuse me, that also was done as, it was created as an interim with the existing description and paid the rate of the actual interim director. So for this, we don't have a job description for the two people with the additional duties split apart. I'm not sure what the division of duties is or what Wagner would say with, if they were to look at the actual position with their existing duties plus whichever half of the administrator's duties there would be. So we don't have an amount for that. With our others that have had, our directors that have had this situation in the past, in addition to the health department, when the highway department executive director left, we had the new director came in on a contract ahead of time. And that was not, they were not an employee at that time for that training period, so there was no crossover. The actual job description was filled with the new director. With the area plan, a temporary administrator was created, and Sally moved into that plan. It was for a maximum amount of time, and they actually used less time. And David came into the actual position with the actual description. So we've never had an instance, at least in the last 15 years plus that I've been here, where we've moved someone in without an actual description. And I think a lot of this was timing, because we didn't look at it until, I think it was the week that Kayla left. So there wasn't enough time at that point, with the process being that the job description has to be created, goes through Wagner for proper certification. After that, it goes to the Personnel Committee. The Personnel Committee makes the recommendation to the commissioners. The commissioners create the position at their meeting, and then the department gets on the council agenda to do the salary statement and the appropriation if necessary. So, did that answer all of your collective questions?
And sure, just to give everyone a timeline of that process, that's a several-month process, correct?
It depends on the timing. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's roughly, usually about a 2-week turnaround if there's no questions on, if it's straightforward and there's no questions, no back and forth between myself, the department, and Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy. Once that's created, then we schedule a meeting, and the committee meets, and the department head comes in with that. So again, with the timing, then we would tell them to get on the next commissioners meeting. Commissioners meet twice a month. There's deadlines to get into on the council agenda. So it's usually at least a month to actually get to this point. Sometimes a little more because of the timing.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the salary statement, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
I'm going to declare that it has passed.
Could I bring up now, when is this effective? Is this effective the day that Kayla left, or effective the current pay period, which started this past Sunday? We normally have not gone and done anything retroactively, but we just need to know that for the payroll. purposes.
We discussed this, I think Dr. Adler, you were on the call, and as well as Councilman Underwood. And I believe the intent at the time was to make it effective, and if I misspeak, my memory is bad sometimes, make effective the day after Administrator Holstetter left. So it'd be retroactive a little bit. I know it's a unique case. I know it's probably goes against what's been done in the past. That would be my recommendation. If my memory is wrong, Dr. Adler, please correct me.
That is correct. That was
Okay.
one thing that we had discussed and requested because of the timing issues.
Do we need to have a motion to that effect, or?
No, as long as we know, and I'm not sure, I didn't even look at this, but with moving into this hybrid sort of position, and I don't know if either one of the two received any overtime, but does this now make that whole position exempt so they wouldn't receive overtime?
In my discussions with HR, and Shirley can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, their positions would remain non-exempt, but with that being said, for both of them, they have really only put in thus far 22 hours of overtime for one and 18 hours of overtime for the other, so relatively low.
Since Kayla left, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yes. So relatively low number of overtime hours, and it's hoped now that the pandemic is starting to slow down, hopefully, that remains the case.
So it would appear to me, and maybe Shirley can answer this, but now that overtime would have to be recalculated at a
Yes.
higher rate than what
Yes.
we paid it.
In absent of the actual job description and doing the Fair Labor Standards test for whether it would be exempt or non-exempt, and with it being just temporary, it would most likely still remain non-exempt. Likely, without going through the process, I couldn't answer that directly because I'd need to know all of the duties, because the duties are what drives the Fair Labor Standards. So if you are effectively changing their pay rate and they remain non-exempt, then the overtime rate would be based on the new rate of pay. So that increase that you just did is going to also increase the overtime for
That
the
we've
period
already
of time.
paid.
Correct. Yes, there'll have to be some sort of a calculation based on, basically from the 10th, because Kayla did work on the 9th, so basically from the 10th forward.
Okay.
And then back to if you're, a stop date. So what I'm hearing is the stop date is the first day of work of the new person that that goes into that job. Is that correct?
That would be our intention, yes.
Okay, anything else related to this? All right, I think we're somewhat settled on this. All right.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. Thank you, Dr. Adler. Commissioners, we have Area 4 Fund 8668 Appropriation.
I'll make a motion that we approve the grant fund as presented.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Basham, to approve the ARP Area 4 Fund 8668 grant appropriation in the amount of $14,978. Discussion. Hi,
Good
Sharon.
morning.
Good morning.
So we are lucky in Tippecanoe County to have NDOT provide us with grant funding for our rural transportation facility. And as we all know, NDOT likes to do things their way. So to be compliant with the way our State Board of Accounts looks at the funding, we had to have two specific appropriations for these funds. The $14,978 was to be used between October 1, 2021 to December 2022, and that is for ARP funding that they specifically said to use for this transportation. So that's what, I just need an appropriation for those monies.
Okay, any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that is approved. Next, we have the grant appropriation for the $92,000 amount.
I'll make a motion that we approve the grant appropriation as presented.
Second.
Was that John or Barry? Okay. I have a motion on the floor from Councilwoman Vernon, a second from Councilman Richard to approve the grant appropriation 8668 in the amount of $92,005. Discussion.
Again, this is NDOT funding. This is typically what is considered the 5311 and the PMTF funding, and our auditor gets an invoice that splits out exactly how that money is to be spent. And so I just need to, this was awarded for the 2022 year, and it's $92,005.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee reports. Not getting any there. New business that we need to cover or unfinished business? If not, Commissioner FYI, Mr. Byers.
If you happen to be over at Purdue, come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, it's road school. So we'll have over 3,000 engineers, commissioners, bridges, this, that, whatever else will be around. If you're going to try and hit a fancy restaurant that night, you're probably screwed because they're all going to be taken care of, to be honest with you on that part. But anyway, there is road school next week. TCCO, the Health Department, and the Extension are fully in there. I'd invite you out there, but I don't know about health people want to talk to you too many times right now, but I'm just joking. Anyway. So anyway, yes, on April 8th, we are going to have an open house out there, so you can walk around between 10 and 1. So April 8th will be an open house at the TCCO, so you can walk through, see what everything really did a great, great job, how the extension is taken care of, how the health department is really taking care of them, how they're rearranging, they can all breathe and enjoyable. A very big, big shout out to Tony Dildine and his crew because he got everybody moved. And if you're done after this, if you want to go downstairs and see where the health department was, they should have that completely done and renovated by the end of the week, so then we can start moving Zach and his crew down in there. So they've done a wonderful job of putting all that stuff together. So, and the last but not least, but I told her she might as well come meet the wolves. So Kim Murray, if you would please. Some of you kind of really know her. I think one of you really, really kind of knows her. But anyway, we are very thankful that Kim has started and took off running, and I think Andy and I both have our tails tucked when we get around her right now because she's like, hey, come on, guys. So anyway, if you have anything special to say, you're more than welcome.
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak. I know that I've introduced myself to several of you. Some of you have already had an email. I'm looking at Doug because I had a lot of questions for him. I just want to make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's, and I know that we have a big bond to pay, so that's my goal, is to make money on that facility. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.
Mr. President, can I make a comment regarding that?
Is this a rebuttal or?
The employment, I think it's, again, the essence of transparency and upfrontness. You know, obviously, as she was going through the process, once she got hired, I did reach out to Doug and Shirley regarding any conflict of interest matters. And while legally I am allowed to vote on everything fairgrounds minus a individual salary statement, as that would be obviously a conflict of interest, being a personal financial gain. Ethically is a different story in my mind, and moving forward, while she's in that role, hopefully for many years, if not decades to come, I will abstain from all votes relating to the fairgrounds, minus the big budget in August, September.
Okay, I appreciate that, Ben, and especially the new word of upfrontness. Our auditor reminded me that he had something that I blew past him when he was passing out papers.
Yeah,
So,
I was
Bob.
walking around that. I just was looking at the calendar, and the November council meeting, this isn't anything we need to have any final decision on today, but the November council meeting is November the 8th, which is also Election Day, which I don't know if there's anybody that would not want to meet on Election Day, but also the election board, I just got a text from our clerk just a few minutes ago, and the election board is having a meeting in here at 8 o'clock. It should be a fairly short meeting, I think, is with the election board, and I know the media are generally here for that. And so it should be done by 8:30, but not necessarily. So my question to you is, do you want to change the date, or do you want to push the time back? Julie is saying 9 o'clock would be a safer choice, so that they would be cleared out by that time. So it's nice to know, so we can say in advance, but we don't need to know this
We don't need to know
particular
that
meeting,
today,
but to
give
think
it
about
some
it.
thought, and we'll readdress it next meeting. Okay, public comment. I think everyone's worn out from our lengthy meeting. I'll take the last motion.